Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. And tonight I want to talk about how I deal with people just out in the world in general. Because for those of you who know a little bit about my story, it was and still can be difficult to do just in general. Like it's very easy to just get shut in into my own head and just very much try to avoid as much of the world as I can, like in terms of other people, because when you spend so much of your life trying to escape and get away from feeling certain things or being in certain situations, you end up subconsciously, I feel like, putting yourself in a situation where it's just easier to just be alone, because then you don't have to worry about those things or what somebody else might think or how somebody else might feel. And obviously that's just a very, very avoidant way of dealing with it. There's some people who just enjoy being alone and it's nothing unhealthy, and don't get me wrong, like I do also think that alone time is very important and invaluable. You need to be able to be comfortable with yourself and be alone with yourself, but there's a point where the intention behind that, it's all intention and intent. Like, what are you intending to accomplish by spending all this time alone? In my case, it was serving my own purpose of wanting to continue doing whatever it was, and usually it was negative, right? Like drugs or whatever. It was easier to be alone because then nobody could tell me that what I'm doing is wrong. But as I've gotten clean and as I've progressed and grown a little bit since, it's lonely being alone. Also, I have a bunch of wonderful people that care and love me, and I also don't want to be alone my whole life. I want to find the right person to be with, and I'm actually dating somebody right now who seems very promising, and I'm very excited about that. And I'm going to make a video about dating too at another time, just specifically dating, but this is just talking about dealing with everyday interactions, good, bad, whatever. And I guess I'll start off with how I deal with just random people. The way I do it is I base it all off of analytics, right? I analyze what's going on in front of me and why I'm in an interaction with somebody, or if I even need to be in an interaction with somebody. If I'm walking down the street, make eye contact with somebody, I wave, I say hi. If they're to say something like, oh, how you doing? I say, great, how you doing? But let's get into more behavioral sort of things, right? I used to be somebody who was very confrontational. If I didn't like how somebody acted or what somebody said, I was very quick to just snap and fucking, oh, you think you got me good? I'm gonna get you worse. And that reactionary, retaliatory way of thinking has really landed me in hot water plenty of times, and even driven me further into like bad habits because I justified it through the interaction I had. I used to let those things really irk me and bother me, and it got to the point where I used to tell everybody like, oh, I don't give a fuck, like fuck, I don't care what anybody fucking thinks or whatever. And that was true until I did, right? Anybody can say they don't care what somebody thinks, but as long as you're trying to buy nice clothes or do anything and have any kind of thought in your head like, oh, I want to look nice, you, whether you believe it or not, care what somebody else thinks. And there are many reasons to care what somebody else thinks. It's kind of necessary to have a relationship of any kind, friendship, romantic, or whatever. You need to care about how that other person feels and thinks. And so now let me talk about like if I'm in a negative interaction now. Like I said, I used to be very confrontational. Now I weigh in my head what is worth responding to in this situation, right? If it's all just negative and there's nothing that good that can come from it that I see, then I do the best I can to quickly and calmly de-escalate the situation, even if that means, like, you know, fibbing a little bit or saying something like, oh, I gotta leave right now, I need to be here, or, you know, something small like that. This is dealing with like a person you don't know, or like somebody that is being unreasonably negative. And the reason why I take that tactic is, like, you don't know who the hell you're dealing with nowadays, right? There are more and more stories of crazy motherfuckers doing some crazy shit to people for almost no fucking reason. And there's no need for any of us to fucking get stabbed or shot for a fucking petty argument, right? And I used to be the guy who was like, oh, fuck that motherfucker up. And I've done it. It's not worth it. And so that's the way I try to, when something negative is going on, I shut every thought in my head about reacting or responding off, and I go into repair mode. How do I repair this situation at least long enough for it to end? And you know, it's helped a lot. But even like choosing to respond, right? There's many times where people randomly say some really weird shit to me that, like, I don't feel like I have a good response for. And sometimes the best response is no response. Just keep walking. Just keep, you know, doing what you're doing your own thing. Now, when I talk to people, like just in a general regular conversation, I used to just say whatever the fuck was on my mind, be cutting people off all the time and shit like that, and not really caring what was coming out of the other person's mouth. And I've practiced this a lot, and I've gotten pretty good at it. Is when someone else is talking, just staying quiet. Even if at first you're not even listening, you're just focusing on telling yourself to stay quiet while they're talking. You get so much more out of people. Like, not like you need to get something out of them, but like interactions are so much more meaningful when both people feel like they're being listened to. And people know when they're being listened to, or if somebody's just brushing them off. I'm sure that there are instances where that's not true, but I try to listen to anybody I interact with and actually listen to what they're saying and analyze it and empathize with it, because you never know who you're gonna run into, and you never know, this person that you just met might end up being your best friend one day, but maybe you don't know that because your conversation didn't get far enough, because you didn't seem interested or like you were listening, and that misconnection happens there. But if, you know, any conversation that you're having, you do your best to listen and be attentive and try and actually understand and empathize with what this person's saying, they're more open to continuing the conversation. And that's, you know, I feel like in a lot of times in business, that's where deals sometimes can be made or sometimes can be lost. I'm not a businessman yet, so I wouldn't know. But I also try just as hard as I can to be as polite as I possibly can to everybody. Even the guy with the mean mug on his face, it don't matter. I treat everybody the same. I treat everybody exactly the way I would hope to be treated if I was, you know, passing by somebody else, which is either to be left alone or just give me a nod or something, you know, like acknowledge that I'm here. Like Roman Reigns says, acknowledge me. No, I'm just kidding. And you know, that's a big thing too, right? Is a good way to start, I guess, kind of being more alert and aware of how you deal with people, is to constantly try and remind yourself. I even used to do this I used to write it on my hand just to try and remember to treat others always how you would want to be treated. Talk to others always how you would want to be talked to. Because in this world, I really do believe that we are only worthy of getting back the energy and effort that we are willing to put out. That's the law of returns. I don't know if that's a real thing, but I really do believe that you will only get back the energy at most that you are willing to put out into this world. And so if you want to be treated with respect and kindness and empathy, you need to be treating everybody else that way too. Because if you're not, you're not going to get that back in return, because these people are going to think, oh, this person doesn't care, you know what I mean? I used to really be the I don't give a fuck person, but that can only get you so far. Some people obviously take it and they fucking make it to the stratosphere somehow, but I don't know how that's done. I work with people, like, physically, where, like, in some cases my hands hold this guy's life and this guy holds my life in his hands. And you really need to be able to calmly and effectively communicate, but you also need to be able to calmly and effectively listen to what is being said, and also be able to communicate through issues. But I guess another thing is, I read this in the book, The Four Agreements, and by Don Miguel Ruiz. That fucking fantastic book. It's small too. It's one of the best, like, self-help books you could ever read. And one of the agreements is the don't take things personally. And that is such a huge thing. We tend to, as people, we tend to think that everything is about us in our world, because our world is the only world we see. And we tend to think that every interaction somebody has with us is directed towards us, when there's a lot of residual energy that gets put out every single day towards other people. And what I mean by residual energy is energy that is left over from a charged moment that happened before, that now goes and feeds into the moment that is currently happening now. When we take things personally, we hold on to that. That sits with us. We think about it for the rest of the day. We may even think about it another day. And the longer we continue to do that, and the more we continue to do that, the more we continue to take things personally and hold on to these things, these small little things that happen to us, even bigger things, the longer we begin to hold on to these things, because we start stockpiling them and we start doing it more and more often, the world tends to start being against us, and everybody's out to get us, when really that's just your own thoughts telling you that. In fact, maybe you're selfish enough to even think that, because I guarantee you, I don't mean this in a negative way either, 99.99999999999% of the fucking world does not even know you exist. Just like you do not even know that they exist. And that's okay. Your world isn't meant to be their world. Your world's meant to be your world. And you have control over how you interact with the others in your world. And if you want your world to react nicely to you, you need to react nicely to them. I feel like I just described Hammurabi's code, essentially an eye for an eye, sort of, but going from the way I used to operate and deal with people and get offended and hold things personally, I used to get offended about fucking everything. And it's because I grew up the way I did, very rough, really, really abusive household. And because everything was against me, then it seemed, right? Everything growing up and into adulthood was always against me, or so I thought, when really it was just me against myself, and I was continuing to traumatize myself with that thought. But I hope that there was something useful for somebody in here. And I hope that you enjoyed this. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know what you think down below, or give me a little glimpse into how you guys like to deal with people and deal with the world. That's pretty much it for me. I will catch you guys in like another day or two. Take it easy.